I love it. I love it. Wow, I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
What's up, guys? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again with another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. Before we go any further, make sure you triangle choke the like button. I feel like I've not been seeing enough triangle chokes inside the octagon. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but give the like button your best triangle choke. We're going to get into a few comments, read what you guys have been saying. Then we're going to do like a quick little recap of the card we've just seen. And then we're going to get into the breakdown and predictions of this Auckland card. Timestamps are in the description, so if you want to use those you can. Or if you want to listen to the intro and stay with me here, that's cool too. So first comment, Amir Fariva. Leighton, I can't pick Pereira over Diego, bro. Diego could take a lot of punishment as a true dog. Plus, Pereira shitted in my apple pie the last time, but good luck. Well, he shitted in my apple pie again, for sure. I thank you for your comment, Amir. I know you've been a part of this channel now for quite a few months. So thank you for your comment. And yeah, whatever way you can get your bet win, it's a good bet. It was a disqualification for Michal Pereira. But that's a good pick still. You know, you got the win on that bet. However, I'm a little bit salty with Diego Sanchez, just a little bit, guys, because when I think of that guy, man, you know, he's a true old school day one madman. You know, no one dislikes Diego Sanchez, but what us fight fans genuinely dislike is when a guy can continue. You know, a guy can continue, and he chooses out of that fight. You know, that's a little disheartening, and you wouldn't expect it from Diego Sanchez, but yeah, good bet, Amir. Lil Fugo, love the videos, bro. I watch every week and rip fat dabs on the smoke breaks. I'm up $900 USD in the past 4 weeks off of parlays. There we go. Amen, my brother. I'm glad you're enjoying the content. I'm glad you're enjoying your dabs in the smoke break. That's cool too. Par G, Weaver scrap is over evens to not go the distance. I'll take it. And once again, man, whatever way the bet comes in, that's a good bet. So Par G, you nailed that bet. It probably didn't happen the way you thought it would happen, but you know, same kind of thing with Diego Sanchez, but at the same time completely different, right? Brock Weaver actually got put to sleep from that illegal knee, so you know, that guy can't continue. You know, there's no continuing that fight. Whereas Diego Sanchez, you know, kind of wanted out of that fight. Didn't get knocked out from the knee. But with Brock Weaver, same thing, but very different. Nigel Lyles, good stuff as always, Leighton. I poked the like button, John Jones style. Man, that's nasty. I mean, you got to close those hands. You know, when you're going in for your strikes, you can't have the fingers pointing out. But I actually saw someone else had the same idea as you in the comments. You know, both of you guys thinking the same thing. Yeah, I'm asking for the low calf kick to the like button. This week I'm asking triangle choke. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what you do here. Are you going to go for the eye poke again? TJ Kill, without question, Dobson is the live dog of the card. He will outclass Wood. My long shot dog would be Townsend. He should still be in shape. He just fought. I think he could catch Devin Clark. Man, your first shout, I'll be honest, it hurts me. It does hurt. I was taking Nathaniel Wood. But yeah, credit where credit's due. You know, you made that shout, so well done there. And you also have to give credit to the guy that made your shout a reality. You know, John Dodson, he got it done, man. You know, we saw the real John Dodson in that third round. And even in the second round, I felt he was starting to come on quite strong. The first round, I was quite impressed with Nathaniel Wood going to that inside lead leg of the southpaw. It felt good for the first 5 minutes. But like I say, man, you have to give credit to yourself when you're right. You have to give credit to the guy that proved you wrong. This works both ways every single week. Okay, so quick recap on the card we just saw. For those who don't want to hear it, you can use the timestamps. But for those who want to hear my quick thoughts on that card, here they are. De La Rosa, Rulian Paiva, decent fight to start the night. I had De La Rosa. Paiva, just, you know, that frame was very good in that fight, and ultimately the right hand in that second round was the one. De La Rosa started to come on a little bit strong in that second round, but as the round was ending, man, that right hand, that overhand right, was beautiful. Macy Chiazon and Shana Young, little bit disappointed that Macy couldn't get the finish, and that's only because I see this girl's potential. You know, I don't look at this girl as a bum. You know, I've heard a few people, Macy this, Macy that, but she's young in the MMA game, dominating performance, but a little bit disappointed that she couldn't use that killer instinct to get the fight done when Young was tired. Merab versus Casey Kenny, very decent, entertaining matchup to watch. Merab is just a madman. You know, that output of kicks when the fight isn't in a grappling situation, the relentless takedown, the scrambling, the power in the hands. You know, the only weakness to Merab's game is he leaves himself open to be hit, and that's just because he's a crazy guy. But Casey Kenny, you know, I felt 30-25 was a little bit off, maybe 30-26. But yeah, Casey Kenny's a good guy and he should be back. Devin Clark, Daquan Townsend, man, Devin Clark used that wrestling. We knew he would. Daquan just, you know, never there in the fight. Couldn't get up off his back. Even his own corner. Some of you guys may remember the cornering of Townsend after the second round. They was just asking him, look, man, you're not even trying. You know, when you're on the feet, you're not even trying. Really disappointing, and it's hard to see Daquan Townsend being in the UFC after that fight, even though it was short notice. Scott Holtzman, Jim Miller, really decent matchup. Not too much to speak of there. Jim Miller couldn't get his BJJ game going. Scott Holtzman was strong, powerful. Really good fight for both guys, I felt. You know, Jim Miller, I felt he gave a good account of himself. You know, even though he lost, he was a good guy in there. Dodson and Wood, we've been through that. That hurts me. But massive credit to John Dodson. You know, shows us going forward that John Dodson can turn up for these fights. D-Rod and Tim Means, another one that I was a little bit surprised with. But it is also nice to see that even though Daniel Rodriguez hurt Tim Means with the left hook, he went back to his foundation to finish that fight. So we have to take note, right? Daniel Rodriguez has some fight IQ. You know, beautiful way to finish that fight, going back to his foundation of jiu-jitsu. Lando Venata, Yancy Medeiros. I felt Yancy Medeiros could have fired a little bit more in that fight. Just allowed himself to kind of just lose those rounds, you know. Just the activity wasn't great. His straight jabs weren't landing. And Yancy Medeiros is better with the straight jabs when he's on the back foot. Coming forward with it, he takes damage. So, yeah, Yancy Medeiros a little bit disappointing in that one. Lando Venata, decent performance. Maybe could have put it on Yancy a little bit more. Little bit of a weird fight, but a decent one to watch. Ray Borg and Bontorin. Ray Borg is just a professional grinder. The altitude for Bontorin was just too much. Both guys primarily grapplers. Ray Borg more wrestling orientated against a jiu-jitsu guy, and we saw which foundation won that one. Brock Weaver and Vargas. I'm a little bit salty on that one. I did take Vargas. I felt he was doing some good work in that first round, but you can't defend a dummy move, you know. He decided to knee Brock Weaver in the face when he was on the ground on his butt. You just can't do that. So that's a completely fair disqualification in my opinion. De La Rosa and Barella, decent matchup. I went with Barella's striking and her grappling that I felt would be good enough to get off the mat or even stop a takedown. Completely wrong there. De La Rosa looked big and strong in her interviews coming up to the fight. So credit to her there, man. Her jiu-jitsu, her wrestling, her strength is really something I'm taking note of now. Diego Sanchez and Michal Pereira. really decent matchup, and most of us felt if it went outside of the first round, Diego would look to use that wrestling, use that conditioning. That wasn't the case. Now, I noticed very quickly in the first round, within 2 to 3 minutes, already Diego Sanchez is not doing what Tristan Connolly did. Tristan Connolly used good forward pressure to force big motions out of Michal Pereira. Now, some people may say Michal Pereira actually was more composed in there. Maybe so, but you have to remember the opponent has to make you fight too, and Diego Sanchez was using some weird magnetic force thing with his hands, wasn't forcing Michal Pereira to fight, and that's maybe why Pereira was about to win a 30-27. A little bit salty that Diego Sanchez wanted out from the illegal knee, but what can you do? Main event, what can you say? Corey Anderson fell in love with his boxing, tried to take down Jan Blachowicz once, but you know, just basically stuck to that boxing, and you're not going to box with a guy like Jan Blachowicz, man. That guy does have Polish power, and we can see the Muay Thai experience in his game. He's a nasty striker, man, and you know, you try to go low calf to him, he's going to put you out. So hopefully a lesson for Corey Anderson, stick to your wrestling at all costs. First fight of the night, we have Shana Danger Dobson versus the zombie girl Priscilla. So we're going to start with Dobson. Shana Dobson comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. Training out of Elevation Fight Team. Dobson is primarily a boxer inside the octagon, and quite a decent one too. Her hands are very quick. She has good boxing fundamentals, uses her lead hand very well to measure the range of her opponent. Her footwork is quite decent, but that's what she is in the octagon, man. She's just primarily a boxer. Doesn't kick too much, just looking to time you with the lead hand, use her power hand. Yeah, that's basically Shana Dobson as of right now. Looking at her most recent performance against Sabina Mazo, we can see there is holes in her grappling. You know, completely out-grappled in that fight. You know, just a boxer who was taken down and dominated. The opponent, the zombie girl, comes into this fight 0 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a zombie inside the octagon. The ability to take punishment and continue to fight is what Priscilla is good at. You know, you look at the debut against Valentina. None of us expected her to win that fight. She was completely dominated. The fight should have been stopped way before the second round. Against Molly McCann, a little bit of head movement would have gone a long way in that fight. Just the punishment again. She's taking real punishment against Molly McCann. Against Luana Karolina, just the movement of her opponent and the ability for her not to defend herself in the right way. That's the real downfall here for the zombie girl. Now, I have been a little bit back and forth in this fight because Shana Dobson isn't exactly this super well-rounded fighter. I do see her mainly as a boxer. The zombie girl has been in there with a big puncher like Molly McCann and a very technical fighter in Valentina Shevchenko, the GOAT. So maybe that experience against good fighters will come through for Priscilla, but I can't put my eggs into that basket. You know, I can't think she's going to use a good game plan. I can't assume she's going to use good IQ, put Dobson up against the fence, look for a takedown, work the body, take out the lead leg with calf kicks to stop that movement from Dobson. I can't bank on her to do that. If I was in her camp, if I was her trainer, I'd be working on this stuff. But I'm not her trainer and I'm not in her camp. I'm just a guy breaking down and predicting fights. So I can't put too much faith into Priscilla. I do think that movement, that lead hand and the boxing of Shana Dobson is going to be the story of this fight. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Shana Dobson via decision. And we take a look at some odds in this fight, if I can get there to start this card. Minus 175 for Dobson, plus 155 for the Zombie Girl. Kinda understandable. There is a path for the Zombie Girl. It would be take out the lead leg, look to grapple, tire Shana, work the body. All of these things could really play a part in the Zombie Girl winning. At the same time, I just see her getting hit with shots she shouldn't be getting hit with. Her head movement is non-existent. And Dobson, being the boxer that she is, I do see her having success with that. So minus 175, yeah, I'm willing to take that on Shana. Fight number 2, we have Maki Coconut Bombs Pitolo versus Takashi Sato. And we're going to start with Coconut Bombs. So Maki Pitolo comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. We saw this guy fight on the Contender Series against Justin Sumter. Really, really beautiful performance. Big rips to the body. Big coconut bombs to the body. Lovely finish. In the debut, little bit disappointed against Kalen Potter. And the reasons for that are Kalen Potter actually came out and gave Maki Pitolo that firefight that he wanted. And Maki Pitolo landed those coconut bombs. Kalen Potter ate them and then was able to get the fight to the mat, get the fight to his world, which is using his BJJ. So yeah, the debut for Maki Pitolo, not the most impressive. I was a little bit disappointed that he was able to get that firefight he wanted, but couldn't shine there. Now the opponent, Takashi Sato, comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Had a beautiful debut win against an experienced guy in Ben Saunders, and he fought through a little bit of adversity in that debut. Ben Saunders was actually able to clip Sato in that fight, and even some nasty knees in the clinch, but Sato was able to come out and finish Ben Saunders in that 2nd or 3rd round, I believe. Looking at Sato's most recent performance against Belal Muhammad, no shame in that loss. You know, a lot of us respect how good Belal Muhammad really is inside the octagon. You know, that guy has a great gas tank. But one thing I did notice, up until the finish in that fight, Sato had some really nice movement and was actually able to keep up with the conditioning of Belal Muhammad. Now, this is a really, really decent matchup. Super difficult to predict the winner in this one. This is a conventional versus a southpaw. Sato being the lefty, Maki being the conventional fighter. Both guys clearly hold a lot of power in their hands. Sato is way more composed, way more technical, way more patient with his power, looking to use his movement a little bit more than Maki Pitolo. But Maki Pitolo, man, we know what he's going to do in there. You know, he's going to come out, fire some coconut bombs, and hopefully one of those bombs is enough to put you out. Whether it fails, like it did against Kalen Potter, or whether it works like it did against Justin Sumter, I think Maki Pitolo is going to be that type of guy in pretty much all of his UFC fights. I could be wrong. You know, there is evolution in this game. It's a big part in this game. But as of right now, I think Maki Pitolo is going to go in there, look to prove, look, I got coconut bombs. So that's what we're going to get from Maki. I actually think the movement of Takashi Sato may be the story in this fight. Like I said, he's a little bit more composed with his power, and if he can use that movement of his that I see being a nice point of his game, you know, that bouncing motion on his feet is quite nice to watch. If he can use that over a period of 15 minutes, look to dictate the fight, I think he can beat Maki Pitolo. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Takashi Sato via decision. And we take a look at some odds. Maki Pitolo coming in plus 100, minus 105. Takashi Sato minus 115, minus 112, minus 120. So basically a pick'em line. And I can understand that, man. Sato was clipped by Ben Saunders, was finished by Belal Muhammad. Pitolo clearly holds good power in his hands. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it won't, and it's hard to kind of gauge whether it will or won't here. Personally, I think Takashi Sato has good movement, man. That bouncing motion he uses with his feet and that's quite an exhausting style to use inside the octagon, that constant bouncing motion. A fighter we know well, Vivian Araújo, I believe she's had 3 or 4 fights now in the UFC. We see her struggle with that style. You know, if you're not able to finish the opponent, or, you know, really get that 2-0 lead in the fight, it can become a real worry, especially if you're against a grappler like Belal Muhammad. But yeah, this is a tough one to decide. Personally, I'm going to take the movement of Takashi Sato. Fight number 3, and a very interesting fight. Loma Lookboonme versus Angela Overkill Hill. And we're going to start with the Muay Thai practitioner, Loma. So Loma comes into this fight 1 win, 0 losses inside the UFC, training out of Tiger Muay Thai, and she's a Muay Thai girl. She has over 300 Muay Thai fights prior to her MMA career, for those who don't know. And, you know, she's a real Muay Thai practitioner, man. If you haven't seen her debut, please go and check it out. The variety and the volume of kicks, unbelievable. Unbelievable from this girl. Completely favours her kicks over her boxing, and you can see why, man. She's a nasty kicker. Real powerful low kicks, body kicks, just a variety of kicks from all angles. If she's up close, she's using her knees, you know, real digging knees to the body. Just nasty stuff from Loma Lookboonme. The opponent, Angela Hill, comes into this fight 6 wins, 7 losses inside the UFC. I believe she's fighting out of Alliance MMA. Could be wrong, let me know in the comments. But Angela is primarily a kickboxer inside the octagon. High output with her boxing. Surprisingly, she is, in my opinion, she is becoming a more powerful puncher. She's stepping into her punches more, leaving more of an effect on the opponent when she's able to land her strikes. She's fought some very decent competition over her whole career, and she's just getting better, man. We have to give Angela Hill credit. You know, she is one of those girls who we used to think of as, you know, she's not going to do much, she's potentially going to get cut, or is she going to become a gatekeeper? But I don't really see Angela Hill like that anymore, man. You know, her grappling, you look at it against Hannah Cifers, and we know Hannah Cifers has that farm strength. And the top control, the mounted position, really beautiful stuff from Angela Hill. Now, this is a very interesting matchup to think about, because I'm sure a lot of us would agree that Angela Hill has no business trying to kick with Loma Lookboonme. You know, that's what Loma's going to try to do. She's going to use a lot of kicks in there. I'm sure a lot of us would agree Loma Lookboonme has no problem. Like, she has no chance boxing with Angela Hill. So one girl is a way better kicker and the other girl is a way better boxer. So maybe the clinch and the groundwork in this fight could be the answer. I think Angela Hill is just getting better and better with every single fight she's taken. She loves to fight on short notice, and she's just looking good in there, man. Loma Lookboonme is a great Muay Thai practitioner, but I just think she's a little bit too small. She has fought at 105, and I just, that strength from Angela Hill was extremely surprising against Hannah Cifers. You know, her back, man, her back muscles, just, she's looking bigger, more powerful. The output is still there. So yeah, I have to take Angela Hill. I just think she's going to take away that kicking distance from Loma. She's going to look to land a lot of her boxing strikes, potentially take the fight to the mat and look to mount Loma Lookboonme. Because if she could mount Hannah Cifers and Hannah couldn't move, Loma Lookboonme is a smaller girl, a way smaller girl than Hannah Cifers, and I don't see her being anywhere near as strong as Hannah Cifers. So for me, I think Angela Hill's experience, her boxing, her output, and potentially her clinch and groundwork in this fight could be the story. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Angela Hill via decision. And we take a look at some odds in this fight. Angela Hill, I believe, -180, -200. Loma Lookboonme +170, plus 165. So yeah, those odds, I think they're fair. I really do. I think Loma Lookboonme does have a chance in this fight. She's a great kicker. We cannot take that away from this girl. And her size, you know, she isn't the biggest girl in there. So maybe that's why she's able to be so agile, so dangerous with her kicks. But I think if Angela can just stay on her, look to use pressure, use her output and her takedowns, I do see Angela Hill being worthy of minus 200. So yeah, minus 200 on Hill, I'll take a shot. Moving into the next one, we have K, Don't Blink, Kara France versus Tyson Nam. And we're going to start with K Kara. So K Kara comes into this fight 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Training out of City Kickboxing. Also spent a few years over at Tiger Muay Thai. Both of those camps, very good camps. K Kara is primarily a kickboxer inside the octagon, and a very good one too. Holds big power in his punches, especially his right hand. Now, looking at K Kara's career so far inside the UFC, it is interesting to see that he's fought only grapplers, right? So you look at Elias Garcia, Rulian Paiva, De La Rosa, and Moreno. All 4 of those guys primarily BJJ practitioners. Now, the first time we saw him run into a little bit of trouble was against Moreno. Now, Moreno was a man possessed that night. You know, his striking looked beautiful. Just coming forward, mixing it up so much with his kicks. Just a nasty Mexican on the night. And, you know, I speak about evolution. Well, look at Brandon Moreno. I mean, you look at him against Pantoja and then against K Kara. That's like a boy turning into a man. Like, so the evolution is so real in this game. But I feel for K Kara, this is the first time he's going to fight a pure striker in Tyson Nam. So potentially his training camp for this one is going to be way different to his first 4 fights in the UFC. So do take that into consideration. The opponent, Tyson Nam, comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Also primarily a kickboxer inside the octagon. Debuted against Sergio Pettis. And he didn't look too bad in that fight. You know, he didn't look... You know, we didn't watch that fight and say Tyson Nam is just not going to cut it. He was just in a technique for technique type of fight. And that's what I feel he is best at. But when you're going into that type of fight against Sergio Pettis, that's what Pettis is best at as well. You know, trading technique for technique, really being calm, composed in there, not getting too dirty. And, you know, he was just pretty much outclassed against Sergio Pettis in that fight. So looking at this one, we have a striker versus a striker. It's interesting, man, because for K Kara to crumble in that striking scenario, I think you're going to have to look a little bit like Brandon Moreno, man. You're going to have to be a man possessed, a man willing to walk the opponent down, a man willing to take the opponent's best shot. And K Kara's best shot is that right hand. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, I think some of those shots he landed on Brandon Moreno would have put a lot of guys out. So massive credit to Brandon Moreno. But when I look at Tyson Nam fight, I see more of a point fighter than a guy who's willing to take a huge shot to give a big shot. And that's what Brandon Moreno was really doing on that night, walking K Kara down with possession. You know, he was a man possessed. And I don't feel that too much from Tyson Nam. So for those reasons, I'm actually going to take K Kara to get a finish in this one. So I'm going to take K Kara via TKO in round number 3. Potentially a late one. So taking a look at some odds, we have K Kara coming in minus 250, minus 260. Tyson Nam plus 210, plus 220. Maybe a little bit of disrespect going on in that line. I wouldn't say Tyson Nam's a plus 220. He is a decent kickboxer, but just more of a point fighter. And I don't really know if that's going to beat K Kara. Kara's a really good kickboxer himself. You even look at the takedown he got on De La Rosa. De La Rosa was searching for a takedown, eventually Kara just said, okay, I'm going to dump you. Look, I've got you in the grappling too. So yeah, really well-rounded guy, good kickboxer, powerful guy too. Maybe shouldn't be a minus 260, but I would still say my pick is Kara here. Fight number 5, we have Kalen, the Rockstar Potter versus Kenan Song. And we're going to start with Kalen Potter. So Kalen comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a BJJ practitioner. I believe a purple belt, but could be wrong on that, so let me know. His best work inside the octagon comes when he's able to use his foundation, which is what I just said, his jiu-jitsu, right? He'll pull guard, he'll look to take you down, end up on top, look to take the back, or even take your ankle. You know, you saw that in the debut against Jalen Turner. He'll even go for the ankle lock. So yeah, Kalen Potter, primarily a BJJ practitioner. As for his striking, you know, it's not really all there. His striking's quite wild, quite loose. You see against Maki Pitolo, he uses these weird hooking overhands. I'm sure some of you guys know what I mean. If you go back and watch that fight, he kind of dips his head off and swings this hooking overhand, and it can be quite effective actually, because it kind of lands behind the ear, and we know what happens when you get clipped behind the ear. You know, it's just that one of those spots that just shuts the brain off. So it could be quite effective inside the octagon, and I feel like we actually saw that against Maki Pitolo. Surprisingly, Kalen Potter actually stumbled Maki Pitolo a couple times in that fight. So yeah, maybe his striking isn't the best in the world, but you know, if it lands behind the ear, that weird hooking overhand, it can hurt you. But looking at this fight, I do believe he has to use his foundation, look to take the fight to the mat, even pull guard the way he did against Maki Pitolo. The opponent, Kenan Song, comes into this fight, I believe, 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. And this guy is primarily a striker inside the octagon, has very good power in his hands, decent power. His movement is a little bit like Takashi Sato from earlier on, who I was breaking down. Kind of bounces on the feet and uses that bouncing motion to generate real power in his punches. You know, you look at the fight against Bobby Nash, right? That was the debut. That fight was over in 15 seconds. And the ref had to stop the fight for 5 seconds. You know, so Kenan Songman has real power. And if he can step into his punches off of that bouncing motion to generate real power, it can be a very short night for you. Now, the issues for Kenan Song, in my opinion, would be if he doesn't get it done in that first round, he looks to slow down a lot. Like I said earlier on, that bouncing motion on the feet, you know, that footwork, it can be exhausting, you know. So if you can take it out of the first round against Kenan Song, his conditioning looks to let him down. Now, he did have a really grueling fight against Derek Krantz. You know, that fight went a full 15. Both guys were exhausted. But Kalen Potter, being that BJJ practitioner, if we're having that type of fight where both guys are tired, I just think Kalen Potter's going to get it to the mat. So it really is, in my opinion, one way or another for either guy. And, you know, most of us felt that way for Michal Pereira and Diego Sanchez. So if you feel that way, you could be very wrong. By the way, you know, anything can happen. But I just think Kenan Song is a little too composed, a little too technical, and his striking, you know, he's really powerful, man. So if Kalen Potter looks to firefight the way he did against Maki Pitolo, if he does that here, he could be getting knocked out again, just like he was in his debut against Jalen Turner. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Kenan Song via TKO in round number 1. And we take a look at some odds for that matchup. And we have Kenan Song minus 185, minus 190. Kalen Potter plus 160, plus 165. So yeah, decent odds. You know, I do think this is a good matchup. Styles make fights, as we know. Kalen Potter being the BJJ guy, Song Kenan being a technical striker with power. So for Kalen, he has to weather the storm in that first round. For Keenan, I think just look to land a meaningful, powerful strike against Kalen, and that could be it. Good line, could go either way. I'm on Song Keenan. Fight number 6, we have Jake, the Celtic Kid Matthews versus Emil Webster, Valhalla Meek. And we're going to start with Jake. So Jake comes into this fight 8 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. A black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a very decent wrestler inside the octagon, and it's beautiful to see the striking evolution of Jake Matthews. You know, you look at his most recent performance against Rostam Akman, I believe. For 15 minutes, Jake Matthews was happy to trade on the feet, never looked for a takedown once. So for Jake Matthews, man, really well-rounded guy. He's got a black belt to fall back on. His wrestling has always been good inside the octagon. And now he's showing us, look, I'm a very well-rounded guy. I can stand and bang. I can kickbox. I can move. I don't have to just grapple inside the octagon. Now the opponent, Emil Meek, comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a madman inside the octagon. Not to the level of Michal Pereira. You know, he's not going to flip, do a cartwheel, do a backflip. You know, he's not going to get that crazy. But he is a crazy man inside the octagon. He's looking to use his kickboxing, walk you down, mainly use his hands. Absorbs a lot of damage when he is in that type of fight. And we've only really seen him in that type of fight once, which was the debut against Jordan Mean. You know, took a few big shots, but showed us, look, I'm a madman. If you give me the chance to fight on the feet, I'm going to walk you down. Now, Kamaru Usman and Fabinski wasn't about that life. So they decided, well, I'm not going to show I'm a madman too. I'm going to take you down. I'm going to maul you. And that's, you know, the game plan of both of those guys. They took him down, exposed his takedown defense, exposed how weak he really was on the mat. And I'm not talking about technique weak. I'm talking about physical strength weak. You know, he didn't look like he could dig an underhook and sweep you or fight back to his feet. You know, that extra 200 pounds on top of him on the mat, you know, you could see his physical strength wasn't there on the mat. So he has taken 1.5 years off, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of improvements Emil Meek comes back to the octagon with. So really, really interesting matchup. And I'm quite excited for this matchup, and I love to give you guys my thoughts and opinions on all of these fights. So let me tell you why I'm excited. For Emil Meek, once again, he's against a very good grappler and a very good wrestler. Now, they put him up against Kamaru Usman, and he was completely dominated, right? But the UFC didn't shy away from giving him another grappler, another wrestler. But they gave him a guy in Fabinski. They thought, well, if you can defend one takedown, or maybe get up once, this should be a wrestler that you're putting away. And that wasn't the case. So, once again, Emil Meek is faced with grappling inside the octagon. Now, it gets exciting for me because when I look at Jake Matthews, this is a guy who's now willing to fight on the feet. So, Jake Matthews has his own challenge ahead of him. Maybe this guy's looking to kickbox with Emil Meek, and that's going to be a challenge for Jake Matthews if he chooses not to grapple. But ultimately, I feel, you know, Jake Matthews hasn't had to take time away from the sport. He's looking better than ever, in my opinion, inside the octagon. And I just think, you know, that well-rounded game of Jake Matthews, the confidence in his striking now, I think that'll be too much for a guy who's been off the sport for 1.5 years in Emil Meek. And I'm actually going to take Jake Matthews to get it done with his striking that I've been speaking about. I think he has good power in his hands. I think he's confident with his hands, and I think he could put out Emil Meek on the feet. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Jake Matthews via TKO in round number 2. And we take a look at some odds. Emil Meek plus 200, plus 180. Jake Matthews minus 200, minus 220, minus 210, minus 230. So yeah, decent line kinda on Jake Matthews. I think he's a very well-rounded guy. He could take this fight to the mat. He can use his BJJ. He can kickbox. Email Meek, man. Tough matchup to return after a year and a half. But I will say, I'm kind of excited to see, what have you been doing in a year and a half off? I'm assuming building more physical strength, working on his wrestling and his BJJ. But Jake Matthews is a very, very good guy, man. So minus 210, minus 220, I'm willing to take it. Jalen, the Tarantula Turner versus Joshua Culibao. And we're going to start with the Tarantula. So Jalen Turner comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. A tall, rangy striker who stands at 6'3". He's a southpaw fighter who will switch his stance to conventional to mix it up inside the octagon. Something I've really noticed with Jalen Turner is his power at 155. Although he was beaten by Matt Frivola, that was a very split fight. Most of you went with Frivola, most of you went with Jalen, very split. Although Frivola won that fight through activity, conditioning, takedowns, it was clear to see everything Jalen Turner hit Frivola with was extremely impactful. Like his power at 155, whether it's a jab or a kick, Jalen Turner is extremely powerful, man. And standing at 6'3" for 155, it's obvious, man. This guy can hit very hard for the weight class. And you see that in the debut against Kalen Potter. You see that potential for Jalen Turner. Joshua Culibao comes into this fight 8-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. A kickboxer and a BJJ practitioner inside the octagon. Just a well-rounded guy. It is what I've seen in watching tape, I haven't really got much to say other than he has a beautiful low kick. His foundation is BJJ. Seems to move quite well on his feet. Just a guy I feel deserves to be in the UFC. He's shown that in his 8 pro fights before making his debut. So whether this goes bad or good for him, I think this is a guy we need to watch out for. I see a well-rounded base for Joshua Culibao. So tough matchup to decide because, like I just said, in watching tape for Joshua, seems to be a good guy, good calf kick, BJJ, moves well. But the one thing I am leaning on here is the size of Jalen Turner. He's 6'3", man. And I think he's going to use that to his advantage. He's a powerful guy, uses the jab very well. And that switching of stance is something that's going to cause a lot of guys issues. You really see that in his fights. Loves to fight from both stances. Gives you a lot of looks inside the octagon, man. Really lives up to his ring name. That guy is the Tarantula. He's fighting from different angles. He's long, powerful. So I feel that will be the story in this fight. I could be wrong though, because Joshua seems to be a very quick guy, good calf kick, and maybe we really find out what that guy's made of in this debut. But I do have to lean on Jalen Turner in this one. I just think his potential is a decent potential, man, and that size could be the story in this matchup. Moving into the next one, we have Zubaira Tukhugov versus Kevin, the Angel of Death Aguilar. And we're going to start with the Russian. So Zubaira comes into this fight 3 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw inside the octagon. Training out of Team AKA, which is American Kickboxing Academy, which is where Daniel Cormier, Khabib and a few other beasts of the sport train at. Zubaira is a master of sports in combat sambo and a master of sports in hand-to-hand combat, which is some military shit. But yeah, this guy is basically a sambo specialist. He's looking to do what Khabib does inside the octagon. Use his takedowns, use his wrestling, clamp up the legs, use the wrist control. Anything that Khabib does with his grappling and his control is exactly what Zubaira is looking to do inside the octagon. You could say this guy is the off-brand Khabib, but even though he's an off-brand Khabib, this guy is still a very, very good grappler, has very strong top control, conditioning. You know, some of you may think back to his last fight against Lerone Murphy. You have to remember, man, it was as hot as an oven inside that arena. You know, it was in the desert, and Zabara was able to keep going and going and going with the takedown. You know, there was no stopping him with what he was wanting to do in that fight. And it was a very close fight, rightfully a draw in my opinion. But yeah, Zabara, man, the off-brand Khabib, he's looking to take you down. And if he can get you down, there's a strong chance that this guy can win any fight. The opponent, Kevin Aguilar, comes into this fight 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon. Kevin Aguilar has extreme power in his hands. Powerful punches is not something Kevin Aguilar lacks in his game. You know, very powerful puncher for the 145 division. Now, where this guy struggles, it is maybe his takedown defense and being a little bit too one-dimensional. And that's no knock on Kevin Aguilar, because this guy can knock anyone out, right? He has extreme power in his hands. His toughness is unbelievable as well. You look at the fight against Dan Ige in that 3rd round. You know, Dan Ige was just picking his shots. You know, even dropped Kevin Aguilar a couple times. But there was no quit in Kevin Aguilar. He never looked for a way out in that fight. So what makes Kevin Aguilar a dangerous guy is his determination, his toughness, his power, and his will not to quit inside the octagon. All of those qualities and abilities make Kevin Aguilar a very dangerous fighter. Now, I'll be very honest with you guys, as always. I've been very back and forth in this matchup. I think Kevin Aguilar, like I said, has the ability to put a lot of guys out. You know, he's very powerful, very tough, doesn't quit in there, does not quit inside the octagon. On the other hand, we have Zabara, who is a very strong grappler and very relentless with what he's trying to do inside the octagon. Now, as always, even if I'm back and forth on fights, I have to find a piece of information that I'm willing to take as my prediction. You know, I have to find something that's the story for me. That's what I'm going to stick to. And I think, for me, Kevin Aguilar plants his feet when he throws his powerful punches. And, you know, styles are everyone has their own style, right? So earlier on we were speaking about the bouncing style to generate power for Takashi Sato and even Kenan Song. Now, you can have 2 conventional fighters who fight out of conventional very differently. You know, Kevin Aguilar loves to plant the foot to find and generate power, whereas some guys like to bounce off the foot to generate power. Kevin likes to plant the foot, and I think that could backfire against a very good grappler in Zabara. So for those reasons, I'm going to stick to the wrestling and the takedown and the top control of Zabara in this fight. So I'll take Zabara Tukhugov via decision. And we take a look at some odds in that matchup. Very close line. Very, very close. We have Tukhugov -110, Kevin Aguilar -110. That is a pick'em line, and rightfully so, man. Both guys have the ability to win that fight, and it's going to be tough, you know, to be accurate in that matchup. But I just think that planted foot may become an issue for Kevin Aguilar. Alright, homies, you know what time it is. If you haven't already, now is your time, but I'm sure most of you have. If you don't smoke and you appreciate the smoke break anyway, I absolutely love that from you. I said it last week and I'll say it again. I absolutely love how many people are down for the smoke break. Like, that amazes me. I thought only a few people would be like, oh, this guy's taking a smoke break, best skip through this part. But so many people are down with the smoke break. I love that. So before we get into a couple comments, I actually have to tell you guys an embarrassing story, and my fiance isn't gonna let me get away with this episode without telling you this story. It's hilarious. I think it's pretty funny, but a little bit embarrassing at the same time. So let me tell you. Okay, fight night's approaching. The card is starting. I'm getting a little bit excited. I've had a couple shots, you know, only a couple, you know, not like mad amount, you know, just 1, 2, couple shots, a couple blunts, you know. Out of nowhere, I'm saying, instead of saying Macy cheers on, I said Chasey Mia's on, and my fiance just looks at me like, what? And I didn't hear it straight away, but then I realized I didn't just say Macy cheers on. I said Chasey Mia's on. And, you know, I can't get that out of my head, you know. But I actually think that's a doper name, you know. What do you think? Macy cheers on? Or Chasey Mia's on? You know, wait, what did I say? Her name's Macy cheers on, but I called her Chasey. Man, it's screwing with my head, but I'm sure I told the story right the first time round. Oh, man. Okay, a few comments. Melvin Collin 215, mad respect. A lot of MMA fans are fickle, and I myself love to follow careers regardless of promotion, win or loss. Okay, so he's referring to last week. I said, you know, whether your name's Jeremy Kimball, John Jones, or whatever your name is, I'm gonna follow your career. I'm gonna follow what you do, every fight you take. You know, I'm gonna follow you. That's what I love to do, and Melvin loves to do that as well. But one thing I love about this community, right? I feel so many of you guys love to do that. You know, I see you week in, week out in these comments, and I feel the passion from you guys. Don't get it twisted. I know a lot of you guys are here because, you know, I get some comments saying, you know, I love your passion. I love to hear you break down fights. I don't even bet, but it's cool to listen to you break down fights. Don't get it twisted, guys. I see and feel your passion too. I see it every week in the comments. I know you guys are following all of these guys and girls, you know, whether it's, like I said, Jeremy Kimball, Jimmy Crute, Paul Felder, John Jones, Habib, GSP, Brad Riddell, Ben Sosoli. It doesn't matter what your name is or what you bring to the table. We're going to watch your career. We're going to maybe criticize you at times, and maybe we're going to praise you a lot too. You know, it depends who you are, but at the end of the day, I love the sport, you guys love the sport, and we're going to watch your fights. We're going to watch all of these fights. Not just the co-main, not just the main, not just the main card, not just, oh, you know, it's China this week, I'm not going to watch. We're going to watch these fights. We're going to love these fights, regardless of the outcome, and we're going to appreciate all these fighters. That's what I love to do, man. And that's why breaking down fights for me is so enjoyable. Troy Noak, smoke break. I know, bro. I'm sorry. You can't beat the smoke break, Troy. I feel you, bro. Okay, last comment. Promise you, brother. Lando will win. Huge fan of him ever since the Tony fight. That is a beautiful comment. I know you are foreign with that comment, but we all understood it. You know, you promised us that Lando would win that fight, and he did. He did, my brother. So, massive credit to you. Beautiful comment, and I'm glad you're a part of this community too, man. Okay, guys, that's been about 5 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed your smoke break. I'm going to crack on with the rest of these fights. Fight number 9 on this really dope card. We have Magomed Mustafaev versus Brad Quake Riddell, and we're going to start with the Russian. So Magomed Mustafaev comes into this fight 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC, training out of Jackson Wink, I believe. And Mustafaev is primarily a wrestler inside the octagon. Very, very strong wrestler. However, you look at his most recent performance against Rafael Fiziev. Man, he didn't wrestle in that fight. That was a beautiful, beautiful performance. Really beautiful spinning high kick to the skull of Rafael Fiziev. And for those of you who don't know Rafael Fiziev, or for those of you who do know but may not know this, Fiziev is actually a striking coach over at Tiger Muay Thai. Fiziev is a real high-level Muay Thai practitioner, and to see Magomed return from, I believe, a year and a half, maybe 2 years off of the game, to see him return with that striking, that makes me really excited to see him get back inside the octagon. Now, Brad Riddell, just like Rafael Fiziev, is a very talented striker. Brad Riddell is a high-level kickboxer. 45 wins, 6 losses in his kickboxing career before transitioning into MMA. And we can see from the debut against Jamie Mullarkey, Brad Riddell is such an elite kicker. Just like Edson Barboza, man. Brad Riddell is beautiful with the kicks. Real purist when it comes to kickboxing. You know, every combination just ends in that low kick. You know, just beautiful kicker. Much prefers his kicking to his hands, just like Loma Lookboonme. But some of the shots Brad Riddell landed with his hands, I have taken notes with those shots, man. His boxing did look very decent against Jamie Mullarkey, but he is more of a kicker. You know, the kicks are going to be the dangerous part of Brad Riddell. It's a very, very, very decent matchup here, and I know I've said that a lot already on this card, and you're going to hear that hundreds of times, thousands of times on this channel. But this is a really good matchup, man. Magomed, primarily a grappler, looking to use that Russian way of fighting, but then you see the improvements, man, in that time off. You know, the striking looked beautiful, the spinning attacks really beautiful. Brad Riddell, an elite kickboxer, and I think that's what he's going to have to do in this fight against Magomed. He's going to have to use his kicks a lot, look to move a lot inside the octagon too. However, I think the well-roundedness of Magomed Mustafaev, that grappling base, that foundation of grappling, he can go to that at any time. And the only loss he has in the octagon is to Kevin Lee. And Kevin Lee is a relentless wrestler, just like Magomed Mustafaev, you know. So I feel Mustafaev will test his striking again in this matchup. You know, he dismantled a great Muay Thai practitioner in Fiziev. And now he's going up against another high-level kickboxer in Brad Riddell. So once again, Magomed is going to be tested in this matchup. But I think if he looks to mix it up in there for a takedown or two every round, that could really sway the judges towards him. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Magomed Mustafaev via decision. And we take a look at some odds in that matchup. We have Mustafaev coming in -120, -125. Brad Riddell returning +105, +100, +110. So yeah, very understandable line. But yeah, I think the slight favourite here is warranted because of that wrestling and that grappling that he could fall back on. That's probably why Mustafaev is getting the slight edge here. But for those moments that the fight is in a kickboxing scenario, Brad Riddell could easily end it with a nasty body kick, or even look to cripple Mustafaev to the calf. You know, those calf kicks that he ends the combo in, really beautiful, nasty. So Brad Riddell does have a chance in this matchup, but I'm going to stick with the Russian and that well-rounded base that he has. Fight number 10, we have Karolina versus Yan, and we're going to start with Karolina. So Karolina comes into this fight 5 wins, 5 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker inside the octagon, has that Muay Thai style, loves to use her kicks, never been the biggest puncher inside the octagon, but her speed, her movement, her ability to use that wide variety of kicks is what makes Karolina the girl she is. However, we do have to speak about her most recent performances. And, you know, I just feel like a decline on Karolina. She isn't the girl that I know of inside the octagon. And I feel a little bit like a broken record saying this, because we just said this for John Dodson. You know, we feel a decline for him, but it only takes one round. It only takes one moment of showing us, I still want to fight, for that person to be right back in the octagon. So it's going to be interesting for Karolina, because, you know, I know a few of you guys sense a decline on this girl. She is a good Muay Thai practitioner, loves to use her kicks, but, you know, just sometimes, man, most recently, you know, just I feel that breaking point comes so easily with Karolina. You know, the moment the fight doesn't go her way, I feel a breaking point, and I feel like the opponent knows that breaking point. They can sense that breaking point in the octagon with her. Michelle Waterson, Alexa Grasso, most recently, just having very good performances against Karolina. Jessica Andrade put her out with a huge punch. No shock there really, because Jessica Andrade is a very powerful girl. But yeah, Karolina, man, her heart is fading. The opponent, Yan, comes into this fight 4-0 inside the UFC. Also primarily a striker inside the octagon, a Sanda practitioner. Sanda is Chinese kickboxing, which is the art that Zabit practiced as a young kid. When I strongly believe in a fighter, I'm always going to voice that to you guys. You know, Israel Adesanya, Corey Sanhagen, Davison Figueiredo, Nathaniel Wood. You know, there's guys I really just don't pick against, and that's because I believe in their abilities so much inside the octagon. You know, it usually takes like a Dom Reyes, right, for me to pick against you. And Karolina for me is not the Dom Reyes. I strongly believe in Yan's abilities inside the octagon. I think this girl is a real prospect in the 115 division. Her technique, her measuring of range, her ability to flick the switch and give more output, her power. I see a very well-rounded base in Yan. A little bit surprised how well Angela Hill done against her, but man, Angela Hill is improving. You know, she's an experienced girl too inside the octagon. But for me, man, I'm going to say it, I'm a big believer in Yan. I see beautiful technique with her kickboxing ability, her measuring of range, real composed technical kickboxer. And that's exactly what Karolina is too. So it's going to be interesting, because both girls are going to get to do what they want to do. You know, they're in a technical kickboxing battle that's not too dirty. We're trading technique for technique here. So Karolina does have a chance of being herself in there, but this girl is very good in my opinion. So for those reasons, I'm going to take the prospect here. I feel Karolina is on a decline. I think her best years are behind her. John Dodson proved me wrong, so huge credit there. If Karolina can do it too, once again, huge credit. But I'm always going to stick with my beliefs, and my beliefs are Yan is a bright prospect for this 115 weight class, and I think she could shine in a matchup with Karolina. So for those reasons, Yan via decision. And we take a look at some odds. We have Yan minus 220, minus 230, minus 250. Karolina plus 200, plus 180, plus 190. Man, I can't really say that Karolina's being disrespected in this line, because like I said, man, I'm a strong believer of Yan's abilities, her kickboxing ability inside the octagon. And yeah, Karolina, she gets a chance again to fight her type of fight and shine there, but Yan for me is just a real prospect. Moving into the next one, we have Marcus Rogerio de Lima versus Ben the Combat Wombat Sosoli. And we're going to start with the Brazilian. So de Lima comes into this fight 5 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. An experienced guy in the UFC. This will be his 10th UFC fight. A kickboxer and a BJJ practitioner inside the octagon. Now, I say kickboxer and BJJ practitioner. All 4 of de Lima's losses have come on the mat. all 4 losses coming via submission. So it's going to be interesting to see what he wants to use in this fight. Is he going to use his kickboxing? He likes to have that high guard when he's striking, hands high, has very decent power in his hands too. I do see Lima having the advantage on the mat in this matchup. The opponent, Ben, the Combat Wombat, comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. I think that debut now actually has been overturned, so it could be 0 wins, 0 losses, 1 no contest. For those of you who don't remember his debut, he fought against Greg Hardy, and Greg Hardy decided to use an inhaler out of round 1 or round 2, which is absolutely bizarre. Of course you can't breathe. You're in a fight. It's hard, Greg. So yeah, this one, Ben Sosoli, it's clear to see this guy lives by the sword, dies by the sword. Just like his buddy, Justin Tafa. He's looking to go out there, use that left hand or the right hand, it doesn't matter. He's looking to knock you out with his extreme power. As for technique, he's not the most technical guy. I don't really see much of a grappler in Ben Sosoli, but he is looking to do what his buddy's looking to do, you know, and that's, I'm going to land my shot, you're going to land your shot, and we're going to see at the end of the day whose shot means the most, you know, and he's going to live by that and die by that, I'm sure. I'll be honest with you guys, I have been a little bit back and forth in this matchup. The ability for Ben Sosoli to put Lima out seems a real possibility to me, but I think Lima is smart enough to realise, even though he's lost 4 times on the mat in his UFC career, I think if he takes this fight to the mat, he could potentially work towards his own submission, I feel. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Lima via submission in round number 2. And we take a look at some odds. Ben Sosoli only a plus 125, plus 115. Lima minus 145, minus 150. Completely understandable line. You know, I really would give the slight edge to Lima. He's experienced. He's a good kickboxer. Holds a lot of power, and has that BJJ foundation. Although he's losing in there on the mat, that's still his foundation. You know, he could really look to use that in this fight against a huge power puncher in Ben Sosoli. Of course, Ben Sosoli has the power to put Lima out, so that's the reason he's only a plus 125. He hasn't got to be a super technical guy in there. Just landing that big left hand once could be enough to put the experienced guy out. But I am going to ride with the Brazilian on this one. Co-main event, we have Jimmy the Brute Crute versus Michal Lord Oleksiejczuk, and we're going to start with Jimmy Crute. So Jimmy comes into this fight 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. A black belt in BJJ, started training in BJJ at 11 years old. He also took up karate at 4 years old and judo at 8 years old. He's a prospect. He's a talented young guy. I see good potential in Jimmy Crute. He's got brute power, just like his name suggests. And we see that inside the octagon. The way he was able to stun Sam Alvey was very impressive. Something else I've really noticed from Jimmy Crute is that right kick. The right kick of Jimmy Crute is something that really scores for him often. It's powerful, it's quick, it's beautiful. Watch for the low right kick of Jimmy Crute and the right body kick, something that Jimmy loves to use inside the octagon. This guy is also a very powerful grappler. We see how strong he is in his scrambles against Paul Craig. You know, was able to sweep a few times, end up on top, used his BJJ to get that fight done. Now run into a little bit of trouble with Misha Cirkunov, but we have to give Jimmy Crute a lot of positives in that fight. He was very close to getting that fight stopped with Misha Cirkunov, but Misha Cirkunov is an experienced guy and a very good wrestler too, so no shame for Jimmy Crute in that one. He's a young guy, and those experiences are going to make him a much better fighter heading forward. Now the opponent, Oleksiejczuk comes into this fight 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a boxer inside the octagon. And Oleksiejczuk kind of reminds me of like a Diaz at 205. Like, this guy just has that workhorse mentality. He's always walking you down, using his boxing, and high output for his boxing as well. You know, it's not just I'm going to throw 3 punches here. It's a constant output of combinations and rips to the body, pressing you up against the fence. Just looks to really fatigue you in there. His body shot finish against John Volante, absolutely beautiful. I felt he was breaking OSP, but man, OSP weathered a storm, was able to then, fight Oleksiejczuk when Oleksiejczuk was fatigued, and being undersized at 205 and being tired is very dangerous. So it is going to go both ways for Michal. He has that workhorse mentality because he is a little bit undersized for that weight class, and it's beautiful to watch. But if he gets fatigued, it can get very dangerous in there for him. I do think this is going to be a very entertaining co-main event. I think both guys are really going to throw down inside the octagon. Jimmy Crute, man, I keep referring to that beautiful right kick. If that lands low to the calf of Oleksiejczuk and to the body over and over, I really see that slowing him down. On the other hand, Oleksiejczuk, man, has that workhorse, that dog-like mentality, and if he keeps coming forward using his boxing, the high output of boxing, that could really break Jimmy too. So it's tough to decide which way this fight is going to go, but I personally think the technique, the kicking ability, the boxing ability, the power, the BJJ foundation of Jimmy Crute, I think that's going to look better and better every single fight, and I think we could see that here. So I'm expecting him to land that beautiful right kick, and the boxing power I think will be too much. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Jimmy Crute via TKO in round number 2. And we take a look at some odds. Jimmy Crute coming in plus 110. Michal Oleksiejczuk minus 135, minus 140. And I can't argue with those odds too much. Oleksiejczuk really is like the Diaz of 205, just coming forward, just being nasty, just annoying you, frustrating you, and then hurting you in the octagon. That's what that guy's about. But Jimmy Crute, I think, is a guy we really need to watch out for. I think his potential is also very big in this sport. He's a prospect, he's young, he's well-rounded, and he's just getting better and better every single fight he's taken. And like I said, don't be too put off with the Michal loss, because there's a lot of positives in that fight, I feel, for Jimmy Crute. So yeah, plus 110, plus 120, that's an underdog for me on this card. Main event time, and by the way, this is an amazing main event. Credit to the matchmakers once again, absolute fire for the main event. A very winnable fight, and picturing and breaking down this one in your head, I can only picture a very entertaining main event. Paul the Irish Dragon Felder versus Dan the Hangman Hooker. And we're going to start with Paul Felder. So Paul Felder comes into this fight 9 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Training out of Rufus Sport, I believe. Paul is primarily a Taekwondo and Muay Thai practitioner inside the octagon. A really, really nasty, powerful striker. Paul Felder is tough as nails. He's the type of guy that eats metal for breakfast. So taking a look at his last few fights, let's go all the way back to Stevie Ray, because that was in Scotland against a Scottish guy in front of 15,000 Scotsmen. He was able to put him out with beautiful, nasty elbows on the ground. Then he fought the most decorated BJJ practitioner inside the UFC, Charles Oliveira. Not only beat that guy, but beat that guy on the mat. He survived a couple submissions against Charles Oliveira and chose to stay in his guard and pounded him out with, I believe, some nasty punches and even elbows in that one too. Then he fought Mike Perry outside of his weight class at 170. Went a hard 15 minutes with Mike Perry. Even broke his forearm and kept going. Then he chopped down James Vick in a beautiful performance. Really worked the calves, and we saw that Muay Thai experience from Paul Felder in that fight. Most recent performance against Edson Barboza. At the time, I felt Edson won that fight, but after watching it back, and maybe not watching it back in you know, scoring the fight terms, but more watching Paul Felder for tape terms, Paul Felder broke that man. You know, you watch that fight, Edson Barboza landed his powerful calf kicks. He landed his best kicks, and Paul Felder returned with his beautiful Muay Thai kicks, and he broke that man. You know, Edson Barboza even shot for a takedown and was able to take Paul Felder down at one point. You know, if you're turning Edson Barboza into a wrestler, you've got to be tough as nails and a real powerful guy inside the octagon. And when the fight got taken to the mat, Paul Felder was actually just opening Edson up with these nasty, vicious, sharp elbows off of his back. They were beautiful. So yeah, man, Paul Felder, what can we say? He's a Muay Thai practitioner. I do feel he is an underrated fighter. He's powerful. He's never been TKO'd or submitted in his MMA career. I believe he has a doctor stoppage. But apart from that, no one has put this guy out to strikes. No one has subbed this guy. This guy is a real warrior. The opponent, Dan the Hangman Hooker, comes into this fight also 9 wins, 4 losses, just like Paul Felder. Dan is primarily a kickboxer inside the octagon, training out of City Kickboxing. Used to fight at 145. Since stepping up to 155, this man is very, very dangerous. His stepping knees seem to be an extremely dangerous weapon of Dan Hooker's. One thing I've also noticed with Dan Hooker and this tape watching over the last 2 days, this guy has very, very good timing. His measuring of range and his timing seems to be the downfall for most of his opponents. You know, he almost uses that John Jones lead hand, touch the opponent's hand. You know, I almost see that from Dan Hooker in his fights. He's really measuring the range, really getting a read on his opponents, and that's how he's able to use these nasty stepping knee finishes. You know, Dan Hooker is more of a guy to measure the range and time you than a guy who has extreme power. So that's also very interesting, because I've seen Paul Felder go 15 minutes with Mike Perry, and Mike Perry hit him with some nasty shots, and Paul Felder didn't go to sleep. But as Conor McGregor says, there is something that beats power, and it's timing and precision, and we see that out of Dan Hooker. So already I'm getting excited for this matchup. Could Dan Hooker be the first guy to put Paul Felder out? It's a very, very good matchup. I've been, once again, on this fight, I've been very back and forth. I think Dan Hooker is a guy who's very impressive right now. He's a very good kicker, measures range beautifully inside the octagon. But Paul Felder is also a very good kicker. I mean, both of these guys have a couple common opponents, right? And Edson Barboza is one of them. If you noticed watching that fight, Dan Hooker comes out with instant kicks for Edson Barboza. He comes out with instant kicks, almost to say, hey Edson, I know you can kick me, but guess what? I'm a good kicker and I'm going to kick you. We saw how that fight turned out. Dan Hooker seems not, he doesn't seem able to absorb these powerful low kicks to the body and the legs. We can see the damage that Edson Barboza took on Dan Hooker. Those legs are quite thin for the 155 division. Paul Felder also fought Edson Barboza. Now, Paul Felder didn't come out with instant kicks the way Dan Hooker did. Edson Barboza actually landed 3 or 4 nasty low calf kicks before Paul Felder was even able to land his own calf kicks. So Paul Felder went into that fight with a little bit different mentality to Dan Hooker. He didn't feel that he needed to prove to Edson that he could kick him. But Paul Felder started landing his own nasty calf kicks. He started to back Edson Barboza up, and he broke him. You know, Paul Felder absorbed the low kick of Edson and was able to march forward. Dan Hooker just couldn't. It was too much for those legs. And I think if Paul Felder is the composed guy we've been seeing inside the octagon, I think if these two guys get into a kicking battle, I think the more impactful strikes are going to be from Paul Felder. And I do see that being a issue for Dan Hooker in this fight. Now, like I said, Paul Felder hasn't been put out to a strike or hasn't been submitted. So I think to put this guy out, to put this madman out, you're going to have to time him with something beautiful. You know, and Dan Hooker has been doing that. So, of course, he does have a good chance inside this fight. But I just think over 25 minutes, especially if it gets to the 4th or 5th round, I think Paul Felder would have accumulated some nice damage on those legs of Dan Hooker. So for those reasons, I'm going to stick with the Irish Dragon on this one. And I'm going to take him to get a round 4 finish. So I'm going to take Paul Felder via TKO in round number 4. And we look at some odds. We have Dan Hooker minus 140, minus 150. Paul Felder plus 120, plus 125. So very, very close odds in this main event. Both of these guys are great kickers. I just feel there's more power to one man's kicks. And also the absorption. I think Paul Felder is used to absorbing those low kicks, those body kicks. He spent a full life of Taekwondo and Muay Thai, you know, and you really hear that in every kick he puts out there. You know, he's yelping in these kicks. He puts everything into these kicks. And I don't know if Dan Hooker can take that from Paul Felder. But Dan Hooker's a great kicker as well, man. So if he can use a stepping knee or a high kick or a body kick, or even a hook maybe, because the hook he had for James Vick was absolute money. Yeah, really good main event. Personally, I'm leaning towards Paul Felder. As always, guys, let me know who you're taking on this card. Who are you rolling with on the main event, the co-main event, the prelims, all of these fights? Let's get engaging in the comments. I love you all, and I'll see you in the comments. Peace.